Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, diving into this UCLA head coaching search once again and talking about a few candidates that have emerged in the last 48 hours as potential targets for this UCLA program. Now, we hopped on early Friday afternoon and just talked about some early candidates right when the news broke. Now you're starting to get a little bit more of a sense of what kind of targets UCLA is going after and what names UCLA is going after. I want to go over some of those names. We've seen a lot of buzz. We've seen a lot of smoke around. Really excited to get into this one. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the UCLA fans. We hopped on early Friday afternoon, right when this news broke, talked about some candidates, talked more importantly about what kind of candidates we thought UCLA should be going after. The amount of input, the amount of conversations that you guys had in the comment section. I had a blast talking ball with you guys. Cannot thank y'all enough for all the support you guys have shown. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear your thoughts, opinions on some of the names that have emerged for this UCLA head coaching job. We'll continue to monitor this situation. We'll continue to talk about this situation. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with one of the more intriguing names that you started seeing some smoke around, and that is former Notre Dame offensive coordinator, former Alabama offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees. And going back to the conversation that we had Friday afternoon in terms of what kind of candidates would be good fits for this UCLA program, and we highlighted energy, right? We see this program as a program that has a lot more potential than I think a lot of people give it credit. And you want a young head coach to kind of energize this program, put some juice and some life back into this program. I think a guy like Tommy Rees certainly could do that. Now, you look at Tommy Rees and his career trajectory has moved up the coaching ranks extremely quickly. You're talking about a 31-year-old offensive coordinator for the Alabama Crimson Tide last year. But you take a look at the last 5 years, came into Notre Dame as a quarterback's coach, elevated to the offensive coordinator. Then Nick Saban goes out and grabs Tommy Rees to be the offensive coordinator for Alabama, a team that just went to the college football playoffs last year and really had a massive turnaround on the offensive side of the football. Pros and cons about Tommy Rees. The pros, I think, are pretty obvious, right? He is a young coach that can get it done on the recruiting trail and a guy that I think a lot of UCLA fans would be extremely excited about, right? Some young energy going to the Big Ten. Tommy Rees has spent a lot of time coaching in the Midwest. And you talk about recruiting that Midwest as UCLA is moving to the Big Ten. That could be a massive asset. But at the end of the day, two things I really like about Tommy Rees. One, working under Nick Saban is a massive benefit when you're looking at your next head coach. You look at all the success Nick Saban proteges, guys that have worked beneath Nick Saban have had as head coaches at their next schools. I mean, the track record, the proof's in the pudding. And so Tommy Rees has saw Nick Saban, how he runs that program, the program that we saw dominate college football for the last 15 years. I think that's a massive asset. In the youth, I think is really attractive. In the offensive prowess, I think is really attractive. And I think there are some people that maybe question how good has Tommy Rees been as an offensive coordinator. The numbers maybe don't necessarily back it up, but you look at what the head coaches think of Tommy Rees, what the coaching industry as a whole thinks of Tommy Rees, right? He gets elevated to Notre Dame's offensive coordinator as a 29-year-old. Then Nick Saban goes out and brings him in as his next offensive coordinator. And at the end of the day, I'll trust Nick Saban and his evaluation of candidates to be good coaches. And if Tommy Rees was hired by Nick Saban, I think I'm a fan of the Tommy Rees hire as well. This one is a very interesting one to keep in mind, and I think would be a very interesting fit at UCLA. Another name that we mentioned kind of right off the bat that is getting a lot of steam, and rightfully so, I think would be a phenomenal option, and that is Tony White. And there's a couple things that and many of you guys know, I've talked to Nebraska football a lot. I am a massive fan of Tony White. First thing you talk about with Tony White is one, the connection to the West Coast, the connection to the UCLA program, but more importantly, as a coach, has done a phenomenal job. Every stop that he's been at, had a phenomenal defense at Syracuse. He goes to Nebraska in 2023, completely turns around that Nebraska defense into a top 15 defense in the entire country. Tony White is a phenomenal coach and a guy that's going to be a head coach someday. Now, whether that's at UCLA heading into the 2024 season or not is still to be determined. But a guy that has a very strong track record, I think, is a guy that, now we kind of talked about this, another conversation about where UCLA should go. It's kind of the vibes test a little bit. And now we've kind of been vocal. Chip Kelly, a brilliant offensive mind, but the vibes, how well he can relate to his players, how well he can go to donors and kind of people liking him. How can he manage? How does he work with people, which is such an important role as being a head coach? That was Chip Kelly's downfall. He just wasn't very good at that. You talk about Tony White, how much he's loved by the players that he coaches. You talk about passing the vibes test. You talk about building relationships, building a strong culture within a program. I think Tony White would be a really good hire for UCLA. Again, connections to the West Coast, connections to the program, really good defensive mind, which, again, maybe is a point of emphasis moving to the Big Ten, making sure that defense is up to par. Haven't seen much buzz around D'Anton Lynn. Again, you guys threw that one out in the comment section. I think that would be a very interesting hire as well, one that I certainly would like. The next guy I want to go to that is getting some buzz, and this is probably the one that I'm not that big of a fan of, and I would love to hear UCLA fans, if you do like Troy Taylor, I would love to hear your pitch in the comment section. I look at Troy Taylor, honestly, in a very similar way I look at Chip Kelly. This is a guy that is a very, very good offensive mind, but in terms of how he can do on the recruiting trail and how he is bringing energy into this UCLA program, I'm not necessarily sure if he's the guy to really invigorate the fan base and the community around UCLA. I mean, Troy Taylor, great offensive mind. He was at the high school level, goes to Eastern Washington, Utah, Sacramento State, to Stanford. I would ask UCLA fans this. If Troy Taylor was hired to be the next head coach at UCLA, are we throwing parties on Friday night for that? Because I look at that and say, oh, I think that could be a quality hire. It's not that much of an exciting hire. And that's probably my one knock on Troy Taylor. Again, really good offensive mind. Can he recruit? Can he manage a program like UCLA after kind of being at smaller schools, even at the high school level? That's probably the question that you have with Troy Taylor coming from Stanford to UCLA. But again, would love to hear some of you guys, if you like the hire of Troy Taylor, sell me on it, because I'm open to it. It just seems like a hire that is kind of makes me think of Chip Kelly a little bit. So I'm kind of a little bit hesitant to love the Troy Taylor hire. Next two guys that I want to talk about, one, and this is an interesting one, right? PJ Fleck at Minnesota, a guy that has been in the coaching, has been a lot of buzz around taking a step up at the Power 5 level, right? Has done a phenomenal job at Minnesota, really has built a strong culture within Minnesota, and tweeted out that he's very excited to stay at Minnesota in 2024. Let's just be quite frank. We've seen a lot of coaches that end up taking jobs and leaving their programs tweet stuff out like that. So I'm not necessarily passing by PJ Fleck as, all right, he's not interested in UCLA, because let's make no mistake about it. Minnesota versus UCLA, you're asking me what head coaching job I'd want, it'd be at UCLA. And what does PJ Fleck bring to the table? One, he's a proven winner, did a phenomenal job at Western Michigan. I'm going to read you guys the couple of last seasons for PJ Fleck at Minnesota, a program that is, kind of hard to win at in the Big Ten. He goes 11-2. He has the COVID year where they only go 3-4. Then he goes 9-4, 9-4, 6-7. Really strong track record as a head coach at Minnesota. Obviously, a very strong track record at Western Michigan. The one question I have for PJ Fleck is, what does the fit look like out on the West Coast at UCLA? Because this is a guy that I think Minnesota is a perfect fit for him. I don't know if UCLA is a perfect fit for PJ Fleck. But again, a guy that it's hard to question the track record around PJ Fleck. I'm not sure if he's a guy that brings a ton of juice to this program as well. Now, the last guy I would consider, and again, I don't know if it's the most exciting candidate, but a guy that I could not admire more as a head coach, and this just tells you how much he slept on. Doesn't even have a profile pic on 24/7 Sports. Jason Candle at Toledo. And this is a guy that every single year when Power 5 programs are looking to make a head coaching hire, you see Jason Candle's name thrown around, and for some reason hasn't gotten a job. This is a guy that has gone 65-30 at Toledo, consistently wins that conference. A couple of things I really like about Jason Candle. One, I think he is a phenomenal football coach, right? And the proof's in the pudding there, just wins at Toledo. Secondly, and a thing that I think is really underrated when you're evaluating head coaches is how well he does at hiring around him. This is a guy that you see consistently Toledo assistant coaches make the moves to Power 5 levels. And that tells you Jason Candle does a phenomenal job evaluating some of these under the radar coaches who are assistants, gets them on staff, they do a really good job, and then they get poached elsewhere. And that's a sign of a head coach that makes good hires. And so a guy like Jason Candle, one, makes really good hires, a proven winner at Toledo. Again, the question mark for Jason Candle is, does he fit out west at UCLA? That's a question mark that you have. But I think a guy that UCLA should certainly be kicking tires on. And at the end of the day, we talked about this a little earlier Friday afternoon. I mean, Chip Kelly's left this program in a tough spot. It is hard to find head coaching candidates in the middle of February. Jason Candle is a candidate, and I think he certainly should be under consideration for this job. It sounded like UCLA contacted Jed Fish. I think he's staying at Washington. Those are the names that have emerged right now. A lot of smoke around a bunch of different names. We'll continue to update this list, continue to talk about candidates that have emerged as targets for UCLA. Wanted to hop on, give you guys some of my takes on some of the names that we've seen emerge in the last 48 hours. We'll continue chopping it up about this one. Again, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, your thoughts, your opinions on these coaching candidates. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, we'll continue to keep you guys updated as this process plays out. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.